welcome Pascal from Iceland who's just joined us. I think we're going to get started. I think there may be more people. A lot of people signed up, so we'll see how many actually come. If we stay with a group of 20, we can probably just have our discussion with us as a group. If a lot more people join, 65 people signed up, we will do breakout rooms later in the session. So I just want to explain the logistics quickly before we get started. I'm Tara McGowan, and this is our second in this workshop series for the World Kamishibai Forum. And today we're excited to welcome Yumi, Izuyama, and Jackie Kerin, who will be talking about STEAM education and Kamishibai. So the first half hour, Yumi Izuyama will present, and she has a couple questions for the group. So if we have enough people at that point, we will go into breakout rooms. And I'll ask somebody in the group to take notes and put whatever you want or what you discussed in the chat so that we get feedback on those questions, because we won't have time at that point to talk in the larger group. And then Jackie will present for half an hour, and then we have a couple more questions, and then we'll have the larger group share ideas. But if we stay a smaller group, we can just discuss as a group, which is also fun to do. If we're not with too many people, it's manageable. So we'll see how it goes at that point. But without further ado, I want to introduce Yumi Izuyama. She is of Japanese descent, but born in Brazil, and comes with a really interesting background. And her mother, I think, got her interested in Kamishibai and science, teaching, education. So I'm going to pin her so that we can all see her clearly, and she will begin the workshop and do a more introduction, I'm sure, about her work. Thank you, Yumi.
Thank you. So hi, everyone. I'm Yumi, and I live in Boston, Massachusetts, in the United States, but I moved here as an adult. Like Tara said, I'm actually originally from Brazil, and my parents are Japanese. And so I came here because to work for a publishing company and write educational materials for children. So in training, I guess I'm a writer, but I became interested in Kamishibai because of my mother, like Tara said, and she had this idea of combining Kamishibai. Her idea was folk tales that had wise messages, and combine that with science education and give a more well-rounded education to the children. And science education for her with young children was do hands-on activities. And so that's what, and she asked me if I would help her with the Kamishibai part, even though I knew very little about Kamishibai, just my experience as a child being told or play with it or made some Kamishibai, but it was all to experience as a child. But I thought that it was a very interesting idea. So I decided to help her. Unfortunately, she passed away pretty soon after. So we didn't get to work much together, but I sort of continued with her idea. And now I partner with STEM instructor here, and we do together, and that's what we call STEAM, but it's basically Kamishibai plus STEM activities that we do in schools, libraries, most of it is in the educational setting. But before I talk more about it, I would like to tell you a story. And one of the stories that I tell sometimes to the children to run a STEAM program. And I'm very sorry, my recorder fell. But this story, there is a song, it's very important, this song. This song actually was composed by my husband, who is a musician. And the first part is music, but the last part is sung. And I hope that we can sing together at the end of the story when I invite you to sing it. So I wanted to tell you first the meaning of the lyrics, which is in Portuguese, and then maybe we can sing together once. So the song is A floresta é a nossa casa, a única casa. And it means the forest is our home, the only home. And when it's sung, it goes like this. A floresta é a nossa casa, a única casa. So let's sing once together, even though we will not hear each other. A floresta é a nossa casa, a única casa. So there will be a part at the end of this story where I will invite you to sing this song. Long ago, there was a small town where people enjoyed living a peaceful life. The town looked like an ordinary town, an ordinary Brazilian town, but it wasn't just an ordinary town. It was a special town because it was surrounded by a big forest where many very special animals lived, such as macaws, golden lion tamarin monkeys, sloths, anteaters, poisonous frogs, jaguars, and many, many other animals. It was a beautiful place. In the town lived a boy who loved the animals that lived in the forest. Every day he went to the forest and played music for them. And then he sang also. A floresta, a nossa casa, a única casa. The animals loved the song. All of them loved it. But there was one animal who loved it the most, and that was the jaguar. The jaguar would listen very attentively without moving even a whisker. The animals lived well in the forest, and the people lived well in the town. The people and the animals lived in harmony without disturbing each other. But one day, fire, fire, there is a forest fire. We have to put it out. Let's go, let's go. The town people luckily knew exactly what to do, and they managed to put the fire out. But the animals got very scared and they ran away, most of them deep into the forest. But 3 animals went to the opposite direction, and that was the sloth, the jaguar, and the anteater. They ran into the town, and then they got lost. The people noticed. I guess we'll have to help these animals get back to the forest. It seems like they can't find their way out. Let's go help them. Let's help first the sloths, because, you know, it's gonna be very easy. Sloths like to hold on to things. So all we need to do is to bring a wooden pole, and then the sloth is going to hold onto it, and then we can carry him back to the forest. Next, let's get the anteater. Anteaters are going to be easy too, because, you know, they love to eat ants. So all we need to do is to bring a bucket full of ants, and while it's slurping down, we can put the anteater in a bag and then take it back to the forest. Grrr, grrr. Uh-oh, there's still the jaguar. What are we going to do with the jaguar? And she seems very angry. Oh, I know. Why don't we get the fishermen? They have big fishing nets. Maybe they can catch the jaguar and take it back to the forest. I guess one of us will have to throw this net over the jaguar. Would you like to do it? Me? Oh no, not me. Why don't you do it? No, you. Grrr, grrr. Oh, the jaguar is getting angrier and angrier. Oh, I know. Why don't we get the help of the farmers? They have farming tools and they may be able to scare the jaguar and then bring it back to the forest. Oh. Go back to the forest, jaguar. Go away. It's not working. The jaguar is not moving. Grrr, grrr. Oh, I have an idea. Why don't we throw stones at the jaguar? Throw stones at the jaguar? But we don't want to harm the jaguar, do we? But we don't know what else to do. Okay, well then, why don't we gather some stones? And then, ready? You hear it? Wait! Stop! Don't throw stones at the jaguar. I will take the jaguar back to the forest. This boy, he's going to take the jaguar back to the forest? How is he going to do that? Look, he's walking towards the jaguar and he is playing music. Oh, look, the jaguar is all curled up. It seems like she is listening to the boy's music. And the boy is walking more and more closer to the jaguar. Now he is standing right in front of it. And he is continuing to play the song. Look, the jaguar lay down and rolled over. At that moment, the boy noticed. Poor thing, you have a splinter stuck in your paw. That's why you were so upset. I will help you take the splinter out of your paw. There. And now I will use my scarf to protect your wound. The town people were impressed. Look, the boy is now taking the jaguar back to the forest. And he is singing. And now, let's sing it together with the boy. A floresta a nossa casa, a única casa. One more time. A floresta a nossa casa, a única casa. And that's the end of the story. So I use stories like this, and I run, as I said, STEAM programs, and I've been thinking how I would explain today in the workshop how I do it. And then I try to organize my mind and realize that I take basically 4 approaches to do that. And then I want to share that with you. So I'm going to share screen. I think you can all see it. I'm going to put it in slideshow. And so the 4 approaches, the first is very straightforward. Basically, I choose a folktale. Well, it's not really just me. I do it also with the STEM instructor that I partner with, or sometimes with other educators, and they tell me what are the interesting topics for them. And we choose a folktale. And then we basically use that to do activities and STEM activities. And here is an example of that, where I take a folktale from Brazil, the story of the sunflower, where it explains how the sunflower came to be. And then we actually bring real sunflowers and they dissect it. They'll look at it with magnifying glasses. And basically we are trying to develop their observational skills and recording it and so on. It's surprising how they even hesitate to break a sunflower to really look inside, and when they do it, they really are very interested. So this is one of the things. We also talk about sunlight and water, which is something that appears in the story as elements important for the plants. And for older kids, we do even photosynthesis. The next approach is I modify a folktale or other public domain stories, and basically modify the setting, the characters, the storylines, whatever it's necessary, so that I can connect it also to a STEM topic. And a good example of that actually is The Jaguar and the Boy. This story, well, is in reality a Goethe fable. It's part of a longer fable. I just took one little part of it, but in the Goethe fable, it takes place in a castle town in Europe, and there's their prince and a lion, but I changed it to the Amazon forest. And then we can talk about the fires and the problems of fires in the forest, but also about the animals. And I chose 2 animals, the anteaters and the sloths. And there's a reason for that. The sloths is basically because I wanted something that they would like and be familiar with. In the local zoo, there's a sloth, and the sloth just had a baby. So they really like to hear that, to have the sloth appear in the story. But the anteater has a different reason. It's because anteaters, when they eat the ants in the anthill, they don't eat all of it up. They always leave some so that the ant colony regrows. And so that so with these things, we go into behavior and physical adaptation of animals and habitats and forest fires and all that. And we do hands-on activities, and they make palm trees with paper. That's also an exercise from something 2D to transform to 3D. And we don't explain everything. They do problem solving along the way. Then the other one is I take a folktale as it is, and then I make a bridge from the folktale to a STEM topic. And this, an example of that is The Grateful Crane, which is a Japanese folktale called Tsuru no Ongaishi. And in this folktale, there's a man who rescues a crane, but at the end of the story, I basically add to it because cranes were at one point in Japan, they were thought that they were almost extinct or that they were extinct, but some local farmers found some cranes and they started to feed them, especially in the winter when it's very hard to find food. And that helped to revive the population of cranes. And so I add that story in it so that we can embellish it more and work on different things like, well, we do always try to connect with their things that are familiar to them. So claims in the US, but also about habitat loss, conservation, wetlands and grasslands and so on. And then the last one is that I basically write an original story. And when I do that, here I work with, I've been working actually with a local conservation organization. They tell me what, because they do outreach programs for children, so they tell me what is interesting to them. And then I write the stories, but they scrutinize the stories from the scientific point of view, and the illustrations too. So sometimes the illustrations are kind of a compromise between being very accurate and what works for Kamishibai. But anyway, that's another approach I take. And here is an example of that. And in this case, it's a story of a girl, a young girl, and her grandfather, and they visit a community garden. And there unfolds the story, unfolds a conversation about bees because she's afraid. But the grandfather tried to talk about how bees, you don't need to be afraid of bees, and how bees are important, and connect the bees with some of the foods that she likes to eat. And with that, she starts to understand the importance of bees. And with that, they understand that there are many different kinds of bees that are very specific to plants, even different plants, like squash and squash bees. And so they learn about native bees. And then for younger kids, they do simulate pollination, which is making bee pipe cleaners and move them around on paper flowers and so on. So there are different kind of activities that we do, but this is, the original stories are something that I just started, I've done now, I'm doing a third story, but it's something fairly new to me, but I find it challenging and interesting. But really for me, the challenge is, and here are the questions that come from this challenge, but it's to, basically I'm working with a lot of people who are mostly interested, not so much in Kamishibai or even storytelling, but in nature. And so, and education. And so take these concerns and choose stories that work for them, and then how I make those stories interesting in Kamishibai format, and then how I write that. Because, you know, all my life in my career, I've been writing books. So for me, write something like Kamishibai is very new. I did write some video scripts, but that's also different from Kamishibai. That I struggle with what is engaging, Kamishibai script, and also how to illustrate. And which scenes to illustrate to decide. And so I'm going to get out, stop sharing first, because do we still have how much more time, Tara? I just don't want to go.
So you have about 5 more minutes, and I think because we're a manageable group, we could maybe discuss it amongst us. I thought if we were anything above 25, we would break out into discussion groups, but I think we can just answer these questions and ask questions of you as a group.
So I just want to give some examples how I struggle. And that will hopefully help also with the conversation that we're gonna have, because so in this scene where the sloth is, they're getting the sloth, the first time, I mean, not the first time, this went also through some revisions, but at one point it was much more narrative, and this is how it went. The first animal they caught was the sloth. That was rather easy because you see, sloths like to hold onto branches and tree trunks. So people used a wooden pole. The sloth held onto the pole as soon as he saw it. And then the people took him back to the forest. And then just back to back, so you refresh your mind, I changed into a dialogue where it says, first, let's help the sloths because that's going to be easy. Yeah, I agree. Sloths like to hold on to tree trunks and branches. So all we need is to show a wooden pole like this one. There, you see? Now, while he's holding on to the pole, we can carry him back to the forest. So I don't know, I mean, I'm just playing with these revisions. Just another very quick thing is about illustration. And so after they get the anteater, I used to have just a scene. The next scene that I was showing was this one to say that the next one was the jaguar. But instead, now I added a scene, a close-up, to say, and here, you know, it's the jaguar. What shall we do with the jaguar? And create some climax before the different trials that they go through. Another interesting thing that this is almost like, I feel almost ashamed to show you, but I'll show you because it is all learning for me. This illustration, which I think it was clearer than, this is how I illustrated before. And you see, I think it's clearer in this way. And so that's another thing. I kind of, you know, I'm trying to play around. What is difficult is that because I use computer, so on the screen, it looks very clear. And then when you print out and put in the Kamishibai box, it looks different. So that's also another struggle, but I'm just constantly playing around to try to improve the stories. So that's what I wanted to share with you today.
Thank you, Yumi. I also share your struggles and keep all of my mistakes, because I think then students get to see how much we all need to revise as we're learning. And, you know, they can see where it was maybe not so effective and became more effective, like you just shared. So I think that's a great technique to teach as well. I think because we're a small enough group that we could maybe begin to address some of the questions that Yumi gave in her talk, and I can also add them to the chat to remind people. Let's see if I can do that here. And if you have any other questions, you can also continue to put them in the chat, and we can monitor that and bring them up as well. I know we had some responses, very interesting. Congratulations, very interesting job. Very insightful. So I put the two questions in the chat. What makes a good Kamishibai script? How do you choose which scenes of the story to illustrate and how? I think this is something that we all struggle with. Kamishibai seems so easy because it's just a series of cards, but to really do it well is a challenge. So I open up, anybody have any questions or experiences to share? Jackie?
Just the how. I was going to raise that we had a couple of Kamishibai workshops. I think it was last year. I completely lost track of time, where we just invited or people volunteered. Maybe we had 2 storytellers, I think, at every session, and we road tested our stories and got feedback. Asked our group for feedback. It was incredibly helpful. Everybody said how helpful it was to get feedback on how well the illustrations were working. I know, Tara, you gave me some fantastic feedback for the story I'll be using later. And yeah, working with others to help shape your story, things that you think are working, that an audience can give you feedback. Yeah, so that for me, and I know for a couple of my friends here in Australia, has been really, really useful, like making the most of our connections
And actually, I think I've mentioned this, but in Japan, many people work in groups to create their stories. So they're not just working in isolation, and they get feedback from an audience. And I think with zooming in, one thing I found really interesting in thinking about zooming in is you're actually bringing the audience closer to the stage. They feel closer. So I talk about it, you talk about a moving story, but you're actually moving your audience in a very physical way. And so keeping that for a moment, like in your story, when the boy says, stop, and you zoom in on his face, that makes it particularly moving because we are brought close to him and his emotion. So that's a very effective technique.
Yeah, and that one is funny because I always knew to do that because I remember from my childhood that was very effective and I liked it. So that was one of the few things that came from my experience as a childhood hearing Kamishibai stories.
Right. And it's not something that's taught in schools because children are often taught to make these sort of objective drawings, just like they're taught to write objectively, especially in science. And so they never get that emotional contact that I think stories allow. So Tere, I think you wanted to say something. You have to unmute. Let me see if I can unmute you.
I was thinking about the fire because the fire is a very important thing we all know what happened in Brazil with the fires, and in our country, some multinationals have tried to fire some bosques, some woods. But you begin with the fire and the fire stay in the limbo. We don't know any more about the fire. And I think it is, for me, thinking about the importance of educating through an ecological point of view. We must we must say something about what happened with that fire. The animals are going again to the woods, and it's like if nothing had happened with the fire. So I think in that story, the fire is going to create a very strong atmosphere about what is the responsibility of the human beings and the animals. But in the story, everything ends very good. And it's not very good because when we have a big fire in the Amazonas, a lot of species die because of the fire, and a lot of human people gets hurt or die in the fire. And I think that when we talk about a natural element like fire, we must be very careful because we have to know why fire was there, or we want to talk about fire, or we want to talk about the relation between human beings and the animals. So I stay thinking about that because for me, in the STEAM way, it's very important to teach the children that we must protect our trees, our forest.
I think you're reaching the point that Yumi was making in her question. How do you choose what's the most important part with the number of cards that you have to tell this story? And I know, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. I agree with you about the fire. In this story, it's resolved in a very quick way that they managed to find the fire early on and they knew exactly how to put it off, and so they did. But the reality is not necessarily that way. And I acknowledge that. And in the activities we do, depending on the age of the children, we go on to that. So in the story, they found the fire early on and they managed to put it out. So it didn't become a big issue. But is that really how it happens? And what are the problems and how do we want to prevent it? And all that becomes part of the discussion.
I think
I
you
don't know
have
if I made it
one
clear.
story there. I think you have more than one story there.
Mhm.
You have the story of the boy who is a musician.
Yes.
He is an Indian boy or he is mestizo. I would like to know what is he. If he is from an Indian culture, I would like to know if he is from Arauco. You have that story of that is very beautiful. The way he uses music to communicate with the animals. You have the story of all the animals that live in that habitat. That is another story for me because every animal has a scientific life. It's not only an animal, it's a being with many characteristics that give us a way to talk to the children about scientific things, because STEAM is that. And
Yes.
you have the fire, you have the town. Where is the town? What kind of people live there? Those kids that are in that town. What is the relationship between the animals and those kids? It's the first time that they have met a jaguar, because a jaguar is a very dangerous animal. And I thought about all those things and I thought, oh my God, she has very different stories in a story. And I would like to see all the stories. So it can be a very big world.
That's a wonderful response, Tere, because I think you showed how this could be a whole curriculum, right? In that response, right? That the children could ask all those questions. They could branch out and do all those stories. It could be a whole semester right there. So I think that's what stories do. We have to make these choices. The choices we make might inspire new questions and further inquiry. So I think that's a wonderful response. Does anybody else have any questions before we move on to Jackie's presentation? We'll have a chance to discuss more. Jeff, I saw you almost put your hand up.
Well, I was thinking that there's a sloth and an anteater as well, who could also be expanded because they have characteristics. They have very specific habits, and they eat ants. I didn't know they didn't only eat a little bit, leave a little bit left to grow some more. That's pretty interesting. Just thinking, you know, now that we've started to scratch the surface of this story, there's an awful lot in it.
Yeah, thank you. I agree. I just think this gives you such a rich idea of what can be done with just one story. Okay, well, we will have further time for discussion afterwards, but I'd like to move on to Jackie's presentation. As many of you know, Jackie is the founder of the Australian Kamishibai Association, and she's also a picture book and Kamishibai author and performer. And people can continue to put questions in chat for us to consider later, but I'm going to pin you now, Jackie, so you can get started and we can focus on you. Just find you here. Where did you go? Ah, there you are. Okay. Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, where did I go? South of the equator. Oh, that was fantastic. There's so much to talk about in this subject. I'll just show you where I am exactly. In the style of Kamishibai, here I am in Melbourne, in the southeast corner of Australia. I'm 12 kilometres from the central business district. So I'm right in the inner suburbs of Melbourne. I am an oral storyteller. I visit schools, libraries. I visit a lot of festivals, botanic gardens. I'm more listening to Yumi. I'm usually an incursion. I'm not in there to develop my stories. I come in to enrich the curriculum that the teachers are working with. So I don't generally have extended activities. That's something that the teachers come up with after I've gone. So, and STEAM, well, that's interesting. I had never thought of myself as someone working with STEAM, science, technology, engineering, arts, maths, but it seems that my interests and my passions have led me to create a couple of stories, and certainly when I look at my books that I've written for kids, yeah, they actually do fall very neatly into this category. I've written 5 non-fiction picture books for children. This one was launched just last weekend. It's on migratory, I'm trying not to get the ring light there. It's on migratory shorebirds. And all of my books and all of my Kamishibai come from, you know, a real sort of agitated passion, I suppose. There's something that I find incredibly interesting and I want to share. And in this case, where I live in Melbourne, down here right by the bay, we've got coastal wetlands along here and mud flats, and they are incredibly important habitat for migratory shorebirds. Here, the world is patterned with migratory paths of all kinds of animals. We've talked about in this, preparing for this workshop today, we've talked about the monarch butterfly, which is one example. I mean, there's many examples. Whales migrate, but here where I live, we get these migratory shorebirds, and many people are not very aware of them, and they run dogs through their habitat. They want to build on the habitat, and I wanted to tell a story to create some excitement and awareness and a feeling of awe for these extraordinary creatures. So this is the story I've been working on. It's very new. It's never been told in public, so I might stumble, but I think it actually covers a whole lot of aspects of STEAM. So when I'm telling the story, there's some things I'd like you to watch out for. Look out for the engineered card. I don't know whether that fits in with engineering, but there you go. Keep an ear out for references to mathematical themes, geography, zoology, technology. Have a think while I'm telling the story about the way I'm sliding the cards and trying to maximize this little something that Kamishibai offers us, this reveal as we move the card. Have a think about how I've attempted to use that. The tense in which I tell the story, I'm trying to bring people into the moment. So I'm trying to remember to use the present tense and also the clarity of the images. So let me get started. I'll just take off my glasses so you're not looking at a reflection of the ring light. Let's see how we go. Did I say I'll be telling this story in August at a science and arts festival in Tasmania? So you're getting a little bit of a pre-show here, so I'm just hoping it works. So this is a story about birds. Actually, it's a story about migratory birds. The birds that come and go. Many birds migrate. Swallows, goose, stork, all migrate. So do curlew, godwit, and sandpiper. Here 1 minute, gone the next. Now, in the days of old, when people knew only as much of the world as they could walk, ride, or sail, the appearance and disappearance of birds was a complete and utter mystery. I mean, where did they go? How far did they fly? Well, there were stories, so many stories, more stories than I have fingers and toes. There were stories of shape-shifting, hibernation, and even space travel. Well, I'm going to tell you just some of those stories from my European forebears. Oh, and I must warn you, it will involve some time travel, so I hope you're up for a bit of an adventure. We'll be going back in time and visiting Aristotle in ancient Greece, Gerald of Wales in Wales, Olaus Magnus in Sweden, and the Reverend Charles Morton in England. Are you ready? Strap yourself in. I've just had my breakfast. Sure, some of you have just had your dinner. So hold on to your stomachs. We are here and we are off. Oh, oh, here we go, here we go, here we go. Oh, 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 and 2,400 years back in time, we are in ancient Greece. And look, there's Aristotle. Hello, Aristotle. Hello, Jackie. Lovely to see you. We're all here because we're curious. We want to learn more about where birds go at the end of summer and, you know, how far do they fly? What are your thoughts? Well, Jackie, actually, some birds don't go anywhere. Rather, they trick us with their shape-shifting skills. For example, the summer, I should say, redstart transforms itself into the winter robin. Amazing. And well, and the swallow, well, now that's an interesting bird. The swallow, it doesn't go anywhere. It seeks out the hollows in old trees. And there it sleeps away the long, cold months of winter. Oh, fascinating. You know, that's another reason not to chop down old trees, isn't it? Thank you, Aristotle. We can't stay. We've got more travel to do. Thank you very much. All right, everybody, we're going to do a U-turn now and go forwards in time. Are you ready? Are you ready? Hold on. Here we go. I can't guarantee how smooth or bumpy this is going to be. Whoa, ho, 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 a U-turn. Here we come. Whoa, whoa, whoa. And we are in the 12th century. There's Gerald of Wales. Now, Gerald of Wales isn't so much interested in where birds go to, rather he's curious about where they come from, and in particular, the barnacle goose. Now, no one in Gerald's world ever sees where the barnacle goose makes its nest, lays its eggs, raises its chicks, because it's in the Arctic islands. These geese, they just seem to appear magically at the beginning of summer. Hello, Gerald. What would you like to share with us about the barnacle goose? Oh, Jackie, the barnacle goose is a fascinating bird. It hatches from shells fixed securely to the branches hanging out across the water. There they hang, suspended. They grow and grow and grow until they are fully formed and fully feathered, and then they break free and either fall off into the water or fly off into the freedom of the air. Oh, remarkable. Oh, thank you, Gerald. We'd love to stay and hear more, but we have places to visit. Thank you and goodbye. Goodbye. Are you ready, everybody? Here we go. Forwards again. Whoa. Whoa, whoa. Hold on to your stomach. Because here we are. It's the 16th century. and here's Olaus Magnus in Sweden. Oh, and like Aristotle, he's also interested in swallows. Hello, Olaus. Hello, Jackie. Hello, everybody. How are you? Olaus, we're curious about your thoughts on the swallows. Where do you think they go at the end of summer? Oh, well, Jackie, you'll notice that at the end of summer, the swallows, they start to gather in large numbers above our lakes, and at a given moment they dive down into the water and pack themselves into the mud. They pack themselves in tight, you know, like sardines, and there they go into a kind of torpor. Yes, a torpor. Now, occasionally our fishermen will accidentally haul them up in their nets, and they may be tempted to rouse them, but they really shouldn't do this. Oh, no? Why shouldn't they rouse the swallows? Because, Jackie, they die. Oh, well, that's a good reason not to disturb the swallows. Thank you, Olaus. We can't stay. We're moving on. Forwards we go. Bye, Olaus. Bye. And off we go, everybody. Hold on. Oh, this doesn't look quite so bad. Just a bit of a dip. And here we are in the 17th century. And there's the Reverend Charles Morton, who's also interested in swallows. Hello, Mr. Morton. We're curious about your ideas about where swallows go at the end of summer. Oh, hi, Jackie. They go to the moon, of course. Where else would they go but to the moon? I've even done some calculations. Now, a one-way trip from Earth to moon is a little bit shy of 300,000 kilometers. So if the birds are traveling at approximately 200 kilometers an hour, well, that's about a 60-day trip. Wow. Well, the Reverend Charles Morton's ideas might be a little bit out there, so to speak. He is onto something with the idea that birds will fly vast distances and do migrate. Okay, you ready? Here we go again. We're off. Oh, 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 I don't even want to look at that. Oh, 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 and we are in the 19th century, 1822 to be exact. And look, here is a white stork returning to its breeding place in Klutz, Germany. But, oh no, it's got an arrow through its neck. But clearly it can still fly. Oh dear, look at that, it's been shot again. Who would do such a thing? But then the arrow is identified as coming from somewhere in Central Africa. Wait a minute. That means that this stork, this arrow stork, has flown about 5,000 kilometers from Germany to somewhere in Central Africa where it spent the summer holidays, being shot in the neck with an arrow, can still fly, and then flown all the way back to Germany to its breeding place. That's about a 10,000 kilometer round trip. This arrow stork is proof. It gives us proof that birds do migrate and will fly enormous distances. It's a very important bird. So the arrow stork is made into a taxidermy. And you can still see it today in the museum in Rostock, Germany. And well, there the stories sort of slow down for a while. It'll be another 200 years when, with the aid of some remarkable technology, we will become close to understanding how far birds fly and where they go. But that's another story. Actually, I'd really like to tell you that story. And it won't take long. It does involve a little more time travel, but we can just do this with a clap and a click. So let's do it now. Are you ready? Here we go. And a clap. Very good. And a click. And here we are. It is the year 2007. Nice. For decades now, migratory birds have been routinely caught and fitted with color-coded leg flags. Unique to particular countries, when these flags are spotted, they give us information of how far the birds have flown and where they've been. But there's still so much more to learn. Here, at the Pukurukuru Miranda Shorebird Centre on the North Island of New Zealand, there is a discussion underway. I'd really like to know which of the migratory shorebirds makes the longest non-stop flight. Well, looking at those bar-tailed godwits out there, they're looking pretty exhausted. I think it's probably a bar-tailed godwit. Yes, but we still don't have the proof. Well, perhaps it's time we tried again to catch one and fit it with a battery satellite transmitter. So in February, a little operating room is set up and a female bar-tailed godwit is caught and fitted with a battery satellite transmitter. Now, when she makes her migration north, she'll be tracked. March. E7 takes to the sky. She flies and she flies and she flies, her wings never missing a beat. She follows an invisible highway in the sky that we call the East Asian Australasian Flyway. And all the while, her battery satellite transmitter is beaming to an orbiting satellite that then sends her location back to a computer here on Earth. She flies across the southern Pacific Ocean, across the equator, across the northern Pacific. She flies. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 7, 8 days and nights. Until finally, she arrives at the Yalujiang mudflats in the north of the Yellow Sea, China. And when she gets there, she eats. Oh, she eats. E7 has made world news. Da 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 da. A female bar-tailed godwit known as E7 has been tracked, making her migration from New Zealand to China. At 10,000 kilometers, this is the longest non-stop flight ever recorded for a land bird. Truly, she is a migratory marvel. However, where she goes to next may well remain a mystery, as her battery is not expected to last. Now, to the weather. But her battery does last. And the Yellow Sea is not her final destination. After she is rested and fed, she slips away a little further to the north, to her breeding grounds. And although we know where she is, we can only guess what she is doing. Perhaps she's made a scrape in the ground and lined it with lichen and moss. maybe she's laid 3 or 4 eggs. Perhaps she's incubated them with her mate, 20, 22 days. And at 2 months of age, the chicks have fledged. They can fly. Well, it's around this time, E7's whole body starts to speak to her. It's telling her that it's time that she began to prepare now for the long journey back south to New Zealand. She flies a little way to a very rich breeding ground. She leaves her fledglings behind. They will have to find her own way. Oh, that is another of nature's great mysteries. I mean, how will her fledglings find their way to New Zealand? But they will. When she gets to those feeding grounds, she eats and she eats and she eats. She is in full preparation mode for her marathon. She eats until she has doubled her body fat. She shrinks her digestive organs. Her leg muscles shrink. She'll not be needing them. There'll be no stopping on this flight. August, E7 takes to the sky and begins that marathon. She flies and she flies and she flies. Again, her wings never missing a beat. She flies across the widest and deepest ocean in the world, the Pacific. She flies 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 and 8 days and nights until finally she arrives back where she started on the North Island of New Zealand. She is exhausted. Her feathers are shredded. And once again, she's made world news. Da 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 da. The female Bartel Godwit, known as E7, has been recorded making her return flight from Alaska to the North Island of New Zealand. And in doing so, she has broken her previous record by over 1,000 kilometers. Truly, she is a migratory marvel. And now, for the weather. The bird watches. E7's battery is all but dead. I know she's out there somewhere. Just can't see her. Yeah. Oh, there she is. No, false alarm. Oh, there she is. No, not to worry. We've got all day. I bought some sandwiches. Good. And I bought a thermos of hot tea. Oh, look. No, keep looking. E7's flight is recorded 29,181 kilometers, the round trip, and it's taken her 6 months. It'll be 13 years before her record is broken. E7, a true champion, a migratory marvel. Roll credits. There we go. So that's the story that I've been working on. And I think you can see where all those elements, oh, it's cold here in Melbourne and I haven't got the heater on because I know it gets too hot, so I'll just rug up. So I'll just remind you of those elements that I was asking you to look for. The use of the sliding cards, the engineered images, the maths, geography, zoology, technology, throwing focus onto the cards, trying to limit the focus on me channeling my inner David Attenborough, and the clarity of the images. Now, I know it's a bit of a long story, so I'm just going to quickly cut now to sharing my screen so you can see how I assembled the story. Yeah, lots and lots of research went into it, and the way I did this one, and I've used this technique before, create two columns, and one has got the text and one has got what I think might be the images, and I play around with this quite a bit. So there's my title page. You know, at some point I must have thought about having a map there. Following on from that, there's where Aristotle comes in, and like we were talking before, like Yumi was talking before about what you edit out, you often end up with far more information than you can squeeze into the story. So you have to make some choices. Tracking the research, making sure that your historical research is as accurate as you possibly can. Putting as much dialogue in there as you can. A bit like a nature documentary, you know, you're interviewing people and talking to them. That's kind of a narrative role there, narrator's role, I suppose. Making use of images that match the period of time. So this is the image I used to play with for Gerald of Wales, with the barnacle geese hatching from the shells fixed to the branches of the trees, trying to evoke the I think that was the 16th century or 12th century. I can't remember now. And here we are, Olaus Magnus in Sweden, again trying to evoke the place and the era. But for simplicity, and because Kamishibai needs to be nice and clear, I've edited the image. I got rid of one of the fishermen and just made it one fisherman and the nets. Again, all the live links, maps, and here we are. There's the arrow stalk in the Museum of Rostock. In the zoological collection there. And there's E7 with her battery satellite transmitter. It's actually a transmitter that is inserted inside the belly cavity of the bird. Some transmitters are like little backpacks, they go on the bird's back, but this one was actually, she had to be anesthetized and it was inserted inside her. And then of course, that beautiful heart-shaped image of her round trip. So I think that's about my 30 minutes, Tara. That was a lot of, oh, you're mute. That was a lot of,
yeah, I wanted to say, I saw this at the very beginnings when you were just starting to create it, and it's evolved so much. It's really so fun. You have so many wonderful new parts to it. What really struck me this time, and then we have questions in the chat, and I'm sure many people have other questions as well. But what struck me this time was the idea of proof that I hadn't really heard the first couple times. And I think bringing that out more will help students make more sense of the earlier periods, because they had no proof and their ideas were completely bonkers in some cases, right? But it's not clear from the way you narrated it that it isn't true. So I think maybe bringing that out and saying, but did they have any proof?
Oh, good.
And then
point.
say, oh, but they had proof, and then because proof is such an important part of science, right? And
yes, it is. It is, and I bring that in when we get to the second part. But I could, actually, thank you. I'll introduce that earlier.
Yeah, I think that would be really helpful, because if I were a really young person listening to this, I'd think, oh, wow, did they turn to stone? I mean, I might be completely gullible about it. So making it clear that they had no proof, these were just their ideas.
No, you're right. I've made an assumption about the age. Because we know.
And actually, we have a question about that. I'm sorry. Ed Bear had to leave, unfortunately, but he wanted to ask what age children you present this to. The use of terms like forebears, 12th century, did define these terms. Do you explain why these individuals were important? What age of children do you tell? Outstanding story for STEM. So he had to leave, but I wanted to share his question.
Okay, so in answer to some of those questions, this story hasn't been, I haven't used this story publicly yet. Myself, I tend to how would I say, I don't really zero in on ages in a very specific way. I find it's a movable feast. And when I know a story really well, I can, if I am working with children, I can look at their faces, and I often change the language on the spur of the moment, and I will elaborate. And if I'll be, because, you know, we tell stories with light on our faces, so you can read children's faces. So I tend to be quite nimble. The more I know a story, the more nimble I become. So yeah, so I don't know what ages I'll be telling the story to, and I tend to, I've just done a storytelling piece last Sunday at a literary festival, and we promoted it as all ages. I've got a picture book here about one of our famous birds, the lyrebird. Now, this is marketed for upper primary to lower secondary in Australia, but, you know, I've met 3-year-olds who love this book because they share it with an adult. So, yeah, it's, and the book about the migratory shorebirds, I mean, it's full of dense, this is bird ID information. You know, a teacher working with this, there are teaching notes to go with it. Not expecting a child to pick it up cold and be able to understand it all. I don't know if that answers the question.
And I think it gets to your point earlier that you don't always do the part where you can extend this into the curriculum in different ways. But I think some of these ideas could help the teacher and you make those connections. Yeah. I just want to say a few of the other responses in the chat. Diana Garcia says the art was super. I liked how striking it was. Louisa Ong, brilliant way of introducing bird migration. Thanks. Mike Facherty, I hope I'm saying your name right. Kaversham, the time travel transitions worked really well. I really like how you've done that. You've changed it a lot since the first time I heard it. Does anybody have any questions? I'm going to put in the chat a couple of questions that that Jackie came up with, and I can also read them to you all.
I really wanted to share these, Tara. I don't know whether
oh, okay.
time or later, because I just wanted to make the point that the story I just told is quite long. It took a lot of development. It's made from collage and water pencil, and it's printed in I don't know if you can see that. This is A3, and then it's scanned, and A4, and then it's scanned and printed at a larger size. But, you know, if you're just exploring STEM, so I really want to share this, you can have a lot of fun just with 2 cards. I think that story is about 19 cards. And I use these a lot with, I mean, and children and adults love these, you know, who lives, and talking about the language thing, who lives here? Is it a hole in a tree or is it a hollow? I call it a hollow. Who lives in the hollow in the old tree? It's a barn owl. An Australian barn owl. These can be hard to see. You have to really look through the branches. Let's have a look. Who's this? this is me thinking about, you know, the magic of Kamishibai and paper, things you can do with paper. To find tricks like that, I just Google paper cards, paper engineering. Who lives in this? This is a hole in the ground or a burrow. Rabbits live in burrows. Who else lives in burrows in Australia? Wombats live in burrows. And who is this? This is our most famous bird. I actually waved the book in front of you a moment ago. This is the Australian lyrebird. Yeah. So I just wanted to show you those because I thought if people are just starting to experiment with the idea of STEAM, you can just start off with 2 cards. You don't have to start with a great big story.
Thank you, Jackie. I want to respond to Diana Garcia wrote again in chat. I love the interactive aspect of your cards. I had never seen that before in Kamishibai. I just want to comment from the history of Japanese Kamishibai. It's considered an incredibly interactive format. So that's what Kamishibai is known as this interactive storytelling format. So you really bring that out in an interesting way. And I think it's hard to do in this Zoom room, but you could follow up with asking the audience what they know about those creatures. There's so much conversation that could begin out of those 2 cards and unveiling it the way you do.
Yeah, when I first started exploring Kamishibai, I spent a lot of time watching YouTubes with Japanese storytellers. And even though I can't understand the language, there's the universal language of performance. And you can hear, you know, when they're voicing the cards and giving the characters a voice, you can hear when the storytellers are doing that. And yeah, it's interesting.
Great, thank you. Does anybody else have any questions or responses to the story? I put the 2 questions in the chat that Jackie thought we could discuss as a group, and you may have other ones as well. I'll just read them. Jackie's STEAM stories are inspired by her local environment. What local or global stories are you passionate about? And the second question was, how do you want to use Kamishibai for a STEAM program in your own settings? So that might give you food for thought. Please, you can raise hand or just wave and unmute yourself. Diana, yeah?
Sorry, I unmuted myself. Yeah, I'd never seen that, the way that the things could move, like the birds and the earth. And here in San Marcos, where I'm San Marcos, Texas, our river is really beautiful to us, but there's some endangered species there. So like having the little Texas blind salamander being able to move, like having the card, but moving the little blind salamander at the bottom of the river, or we have the Texas wild rice, maybe making it able to sway somehow, like engineering with the paper. So that's another aspect of adding to this theme. So I really appreciate you inspired me to think about this.
Oh, that's good. I had a lot of fun working that one out. But I also like to think that if someone else wanted to share the story, I could send them the files and they could print them out and use them with or without the engineered card. The engineered card just came out as that idea of how birds, you know, go round and round.
And Kamishibai is a form of animation. So thinking about even just how to pull them out of the stage, you can do a lot of movement like you're suggesting without having to do anything too technical. Just like moving them more slowly or moving the cards faster gives a sense of movement as well.
Like the newsreader comes fast. That's the Australian Broadcasting Commission news theme that I sing.
Yeah, that's so fun. I think we had another hand up. Bowen, were you going to say something?
Yeah, hi. I just got back from Point Lobos State Reserve, where I'm trying to do summer climate change Kamishibai. Today was my first one. And so what I'm finding really hard to do is to throw in the climate change part, the story. Yeah, people will stop and they'll listen to the story. But then I only have so much time before they walk away. or it's time to go for them to go and do something else. So I want to slip in that little piece of the reason why I'm telling the stories. So
can you share a little bit about what kind of story you're telling? Is it a folk tale or a fact-based non-fictional tale? Or
they're both.
Mhm.
So they're both. Sometimes I have folk tales, and sometimes I have I'm just telling factual stories about the place. And so it's both of them, but it's hard to like slip in and this is what we can do for climate change.
Mhm.
So I'm finding the window of opportunity is very small, and I want to be able to insert at least a window of opportunity into each story. So
might be an opportunity for again, that engagement with your audience, because I think a lot of people know what needs to be done now, and it might be a chance for them to share what they know rather than the storyteller. I know especially working with children, we're always telling them things, giving them information, and they love to tell you what they know. So what do we need to do? And I like the idea of talking about action, because I've worked with a few environmental stories, and I think if I'm raising awareness about a problem, or I want there to, awareness is nothing without action. What are the actions that we can take? We talked a lot about, it's sort of a related subject, I guess. We talked a lot in this book about the tone that we wanted to take with children. There's been a lot of fear about the environment and what's happening, and some of us are feeling quite paralyzed and overwhelmed by some of the decisions that are being made. And even just weeks before this was signed off and going off to the publisher, we came up with the question, rather than this is what you can do, we came up with imagine a world where. So I don't know if you can see that. We also wanted to include different languages in the book, and we're talking about the wetlands here. So we're saying imagine a world where shorebirds can roost and feed in peace. People and pets can share the beach, and how that can be, rather than telling people what they needed to do.
that's excellent.
Yeah. We're watching our adjectives and verbs very closely.
Yes. Oh, that's wonderful. And that's something that can be incorporated in the cards as well.
Yeah.
Tere, I think you had your hand up.
Yeah. I work the migration birds with the immigration people. And in the drawing, there were golondrinas. I don't know how to say it in English. Golondrinas, and the people from Central America emigrating, and near them the golondrinas, and the way golondrinas has the seeds, and the way the people walk and emigrate to cultivate the land for other people. So in that story, I make a comparison between the migration of the birds, the kilometers, birds and people walk or fly to reach to some place. And I talk about the children with maps, about the immigration people in all the world, and how they are suffering because of that, of the vision we have of the migrant people. And they love the way people and birds were integrated in that story. And in some pictures, you know, I use the pop-out lamina to
Pop-up card.
and the birds go out of the Kamishibai. That is well, a technique I love to use. Things go out of the Kamishibai and enter again. And now the man who built me the Kamishibai, he's making a wider one, because I am entering inside strong cardboard, like the one of the Amazona in the forest, that las láminas cambiaban, the pictures changed, but it was the fire in the front and the animals were crossing. I think it's a very interesting way of working with technology and movement also. One thing I saw in this story is that I would like to see the people that is talking to you bigger. Maybe like looking at you, because I saw them very, very small. And maybe it could be more interesting if they are talking to you and later they show you the bird, because we cannot see the men that you are talking about. I couldn't see them very well, but it would be interesting to see them looking at you, very big, looking at you, and later we can see the birds.
Yeah, yeah. I've one of my Kamishibai stories, which is also 19 cards, I used it for quite a few years, and then I slowly recreated the whole set again. You know, I used them, and gradually the audiences and the cards told me what I needed to do, and a little voice inside me said, no, they're all right. And then a friend of mine said, don't do them again. It's a huge amount of work. And then I thought, no, I am. So I redrew, rescanned,
both works are beautiful.
Yeah, the whole lot. So I'll probably sit with these ones for a little while, work the story, and I think probably, I agree with you. I think I do like, well, I think we are all now innately visually literate through movies. So we might not know the technical words, but we know about extreme close-up, wide shot, zoom shot. We know these, and I think they work really well with Kamishibai. When you suddenly have a big close-up, like the jaguar, I think it works really well. Yes. Someone's face going. But I have assumed with the birds that people know what swallows are. Storks, godwits. Yeah.
I think you've made huge improvements, though, in the way you're interacting with those characters. Because at the beginning, when you told it to me, it wasn't so much a conversation. You were more telling the history, and now they're saying Jackie.
Yes. They're coming with me. Come with me.
You're developing that. That's
I
great.
like it very much. I like both stories. I love them.
Yeah, and
I have my way to see things, but I love both stories.
I separated the stories so I could tell either one or the other. This is me thinking ahead, thinking sometimes you're asked to tell a story, but only 10 minutes. That's, so I've got 2 10-minute stories there, which I can tell separately and have a bit of fun with. But yeah.
And that's so very much like street performance, Kamishibai, to have the next episode. So you could tell it over many sessions.
I can see a question there. Do all those 19 cards fit into the back of your stage? They do. I can swing this around. It's quite wide. I can fit a lot of cards in there.
Mhm.
So, and normally I would be sliding them back into the back of the stage as I tell the story, but for Zoom, it's a bit, you know, you end up getting lost behind the cards. So I've just been putting them beside me. But I've also had fun with biographies. This is a set of cards that collaborated with a friend of mine and it's interesting collaborating. The first time I collaborated, I couldn't communicate with the artist about moving the cards left to right, and that was one of the strongest things that we had working for us with Kamishibai. But my friend Lorraine Callow, she got that straight away. And this is a biographical story about Nathaniel Bagshaw Ward, an Englishman who came up with the idea of transporting plants in glass and wooden cases on board ships, completely sealed, so they're protected from salt spray and goats and rats. And the story starts in 1897, where Nathaniel is a little boy who loves reading, and his favorite subject is plants. So there's quite a few cards there, but I used that story for quite a while. But while I was working on that, I was working on a picture book. So it's the same story, but it's a completely different thing, a picture book. And there is the little boy who loved to read about plants. But we also had fun. You know, we go to all this trouble to create this artwork for our stories. And Lorraine and I had fun just printing up the Kamishibai cards into a little book. We just took this to a printer, and these are her Kamishibai cards with the text.
Mhm.
And yeah, it also means that people can have a look at this as well. Like Walter, I set myself up in the botanical gardens occasionally, and I'll tell this story. I can have that little book and my book, and I've also got a replica case. So
I would like to ask,
Tere?
I would like to ask both artists to explain us how important is to work with STEAM with the children and with people in general. The way they see the working with STEAM, how important is.
I'll let Yumi go first. I feel I've talked enough for the moment.
How important, I'm sorry, I can.
How important is to work in the schools with the concept of STEAM in this era, in this new era, in a pandemic era?
Yeah. So in schools, I feel like because very often subjects are taught very separately, there is no kind of interdisciplinary connection, and STEAM does that. So brings, science seems like something very objective, but a story is something also very emotional. And these things, in reality, we humans are one. I mean, these things are together. And so when you approach in a form of STEAM, where so many aspects of it, science, mathematics, and technology, and engineering, and arts, I mean, it's like gives, to me, it's like a 360 view, and things are not just separated into, okay, I'm going to study history today, I'm going to study mathematics, and it's all separate and compartmentalized. With this, children really see how the world is integrated, and all these things have intertwined, are intertwined. And I love the way you talked about, I just really liked the way you talked about the immigration of people and birds. That's such a wonderful way to introduce, to the children to see how these things are all integrated, and animals and humans, we all do these things. It's natural, it's part of us. And so I see that way that STEAM is something that brings a more wholesome education to the children to see the world in a more integrated way.
I think that was just so well said, Yumi. And yeah, I think, I believe that thinking is fun, and learning new things is fun, and talking is fun, and yeah, and having knowledge so you can be an advocate and be an agent for change. I think stories, STEAM stories really help with that. And the people connection, I think, is really important. And for the flyway story, for the bird story, the flyway we live on covers 23 countries. So imagine how many faiths, languages, dialects that includes. We're talking, I think over 3 billion people live on this eastern edge of Asia where our birds fly. So that was a really important thing. I'm just showing this photo again from the book, emphasizing the languages and cultures that connect us. That we are a global system. We're not all these little parts. And yeah.
I'd just like to add quickly that in our last workshop, it was mentioned that Kamishibai isn't incorporated into the curriculum that much in Japan. But the way it has been incorporated has been in classes where they're looking at this more comprehensive learning about society, about how we interact with each other in the world. It's, I don't know the word in English, but it's like comprehensive learning. So it's not for a specific subject, but like Yumi was saying, it's really to understand the world in a more holistic way. So I think there is a lot to that. Sorry, Jackie, I interrupted you.
Finding that I'm trying to express things for the first time today, things that are in my head. So finding the words is hard. We work so much intuitively, and I do often think about, you know, my brain and what helps me learn and think and be motivated, and it's lots of things. It's not like Yumi was saying, everything gets compartmentalized. I think a good story often uses, I think of it as many arrows in the quiver. It might be, yeah, and STEAM covers that, you know, art and science and maths. You know, these are like many things to light up the brain. Yeah, music.
Great, thank you. I should also ask both of you, I know Yumi, you make your cards available on request, right? So maybe if you could both talk a little bit about that. I also love that you have the book and Kamishibai version, and there's such different formats. You can really demonstrate that with your different versions of your stories, Jackie. So maybe if, I'm sure people would be interested in knowing how to acquire some of these cards too.
Yeah, so I just thought, you know, I take a long time to create these stories, so I thought, why don't I also share them? So, you know, you can contact me through my website, JapanesePaperTheater.com, and then I print it in just, you know, it's just a wide, how do you say, printer that can print white paper, and I just print it. It's inkjet, it's, you know, it's really homemade. But if you're interested in any of the stories are in the in my website, and also, but I have to say, I also keep revising them. So, you know, I want to say actually to Walter and Renu, who have this story, that you will have the one revised one at some point when I feel like this is a much better version, and you will receive by mail. So you know, it's going to be like, you know, these versions, like computer versions or whatever. Mm-hmm. But anyway, so yeah, I mean, it's all work in progress, but I'm happy to share them too.
Yeah, I love that because I know when I published a book, and maybe you can comment on this, Jackie, with your picture books, they're kind of set in stone. But what I love about Kamishibai is you can always add cards, change cards, switch the order, and play with it.
Absolutely. But yeah, it's one of the hard things about feedback too. I remember with Tara, when you gave me some feedback about some of the images, and I thought, oh no, that means I've got to go back and work. But I knew you were right. And you just sort of go with it. Yeah, my stories, I do have them on in PDFs and JPEGs. You know, much as I like the idea of selling stories and publishing them, I don't think that's going to happen. So I am happy to be contacted, and I can either send through WeTransfer or whatever, and people can print them out at their end. I always remind people to print them on matte so they're not shiny and they don't flare in the lights. That's what I can offer. A lot of the stories I think are a bit peculiar to Australia, so that you'd have to work out ways to adapt them, I think. I'm not sure. I mean, in Australia, we tell stories from all over the world, but we absorb a lot. We see a lot in our media and our films, and but I don't know how. Sometimes when I've been traveling, people don't seem to know so much about our animals and things here. So, yeah, I'm happy to do that. I always ask people not to try and profit from my work. I think you might have noticed too that there was a card it was a bit hard to read. It's I don't know if you can read that. These are the people who did the research around E7, the Bartel Godwit that did the first tracking. I just felt that was important. I noticed that Yumi had in her PowerPoint something that said, you know, stories from the global commons, or whatever the expression is. Yeah, scientific work, intellectual property. I'm just kind of covering myself there.
Yeah, actually,
yeah, I have a website and it has a contact there. So
in our last workshop, the story that you'll see if you weren't there, they told a story about the historical doll exchange between Japan and the United States. And they put a lot of references on the backs of the cards. Donna and I were translating it in English, but it was almost like a research paper, even though it was a script, but then they had so many references. So that can be very useful too for teachers if they want to extend what you've done into other areas.
Yeah, and our teachers are very busy, so as we know, so the more information, the easier you can make it for teachers, the better. I write down, we have teachers' notes, teaching notes with all the books that I've done, just so they can, a busy teacher or someone, or you get a teacher who wants to work with that theme, but they really don't know much about it. So they're just one step ahead of the kids all the way. But good teaching notes can help them.
So we have a little more time. Oh, Mike, you have a question?
Well, just something to say, really. As well as doing Kamishibai, what I've done for teachers is produce the Kamishibai cards into a little spiral-bound book, which I can leave with them, so they then don't have to have me there to do the story. And this is from the Japan Society. They've made Kamishibai available over here in England, and they've been quite grateful for them. They don't cost very much to make, because it's just, you know, reproducing the Kamishibai cards in a little spiral-bound book. Because Jackie was talking about teachers' notes, and I was thinking, well, this is something that they keep. See, there's that dreadful neighbour pretending to be Hanasaka Jisan.
So, Mike, where do you put the text on there? Is it somewhere on the cards, or do the teachers make it up?
I give them a separate text rather than it being on the back of the cards, because of otherwise it gets twice as thick, and this is nice and easy for going into a class. It's just something I do. I don't know if it's of use to anyone, but teachers have said that the children have used it after I'm gone, which is quite good.
Great, thank you.
That made me think of something that is coming up in when I visit some libraries now, and I'm still kind of trying to see how what could be, there is some adaptation I should do to make it work, but you know, that's a copyrighted name, but Story Walk, where you have these panels of pictures with the text, and it's outdoors, and it's individual panel, and you walk along, and you can kind of read the story as you walk along. And so some of the parks are interested in doing that. And I've done a couple because they asked me, but then I didn't really have time. I just did straightforward the Kamishibai into Story Walk without making any changes to it. But I was kind of wondering, you know, what kind of adaptations would make sense to do to work, or what is the difference, or, you know, it's just something intriguing. And if anyone had any idea about it, I would love to hear.
One thing I could say is I think that's more of a format for a emakimono, or like a scroll, because it's not the cards revealing things. You're having the narrative take place over a long stretch. So looking at how narrative techniques from picture scrolls might be useful.
Love the
That's very
idea.
interesting.
Yeah, we're in the process here of getting a purpose-built wetland center. It'll be a multi-million-dollar facility down by one of the wetlands, and hopefully a site that people will visit from all around the world. And in my imagination, I'm creating some resources that possibly volunteers could use at the wetland center. I was thinking about, you know, the question about age appropriateness and what the receiver of the story needs to bring to the story in order to get the most out of it. But if the story I've just told was used within the wetland center, people would be coming there, and it'll be immersed in a lot of information. And yeah, so I'm hoping that there might be volunteers who'll be confident enough if I wrote on the back of the cards to tell the story or use it in some way. Yeah.
I told a story about dinosaurs in the American Museum of Natural History, and the kids just, as soon as the story was done, they went rushing out of the room, and we were like, what happened? And they all wanted to go find the dinosaurs that were in the story. So the docents were like, wow, you know, that's the kind of story we need, because it just sparked them wanting to see the object. So yeah, that's great. Anybody else have anything to add? Or if you want to say something that you're doing and let us know. We're almost out of time, so I want to make sure to thank Jackie and Yumi for really wonderful sharing, and also having the bravery to share things that are in process, right? We're all trying to do that, but some people get nervous about doing that. So I thank you both for sharing how your stories are evolving. And I should also mention before we go that we will be archiving this video. So if you have friends who are interested who weren't able to come, please let them know. And we will have a very different topic in July. Geraldine is here. She'll be one of the presenters of a team, actually, 2 teams, I think, presenting on teaching second language through Kamishibai. So I don't know, Geraldine, if you want to say a little something about that, if you're can unmute.
Well, I think all I can say is that you're absolutely right. That's what we will be doing. Yes, there are 5 of us. There's 2 Japanese presenters, 1 German, and three Japanese presenters, one German and one French. I am the French one.
Oh, and
Which you might have gathered.
we should mention that it's earlier also, so people can prepare. It'll be the 16th of July. Is that correct? At least for us in the US. Donna keeps track of all these things. You have to unmute, or Geraldine maybe.
Geraldine, was it the 23rd?
Oh no.
No, I'm 16th of July.
It is the 16th. Yeah, 16th
Oh, yes.
of July. So if you look at our calendar, most of our workshops are the second to the last or last weekend, but this one is a little earlier because we're trying to coordinate with so many different presenters. But I know this is an important topic for many people, so I look forward to that as well. So thank you so much, all of you, for coming and sharing. And if you have further questions, contact us and we'll pass them on and continue this conversation. Thank you all, and see you next month.
Thank you so much, Tara, for making it possible.
Thank you.
It was so fun for me. Thank you.
Thank you very much.